The Chief Rabbi of the United Kingdom actually has the title of the Chief Rabbi of the United Hebrew Congregation of the Commonwealth. And Rabbi Ephraim Mirvis is the 11th Chief Rabbi to serve the Jewish communities of the entire Commonwealth, including Australia. This is his very first visit as Chief Rabbi to Australia, and we are delighted that he has found time in an extremely busy schedule to come and speak to the students of Mount Scopus. I am sure that the Chief Rabbi is going to give us inspiration and wisdom, and I hope that he will enjoy being here. I learned this morning that his predecessor, but three, the Chief Rabbi who visited Mount Scopus in 1962, reported he was moved to tears by seeing such a fantastic achievement as was this school. I hope that Rabbi Mirvis may or may not be moved to tears, but also regards it as a wonderful opportunity to see our fine school. Rabbi Mirvis is going to speak to us on the subject of the Nobel Prizes and what we can learn from them. And I invite Rabbi Mirvis to address us now.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Kennard. Members of staff, students, it's a huge pleasure for me to be here today, to have the opportunity to meet you, to see your superb school, of which I have heard such a lot, and to have an opportunity to share some thoughts with you. So first of all, how many of you have heard of the Nobel Prizes? Great, okay. How many of you know who Mr. Nobel was? Oh, good, all right. And what I want to share with you to start with is the origin of the prizes, in case you haven't heard it. Mr. Nobel, who thought of the idea of the Nobel Prizes, how did that all come about? Actually, it's a fascinating story. In fact, if it didn't really happen, you might think that somebody made it up. Alfred Nobel was born in 1833 in Stockholm in Sweden. He was a chemist. That's a type of scientist who works in an area through which he can create lots of inventions. And in fact, Nobel was the inventor of 250 inventions that he patented. And the one that he was most proud about was dynamite. Yes, it was Alfred Nobel who invented dynamite. And he derived so much satisfaction from knowing that his invention was able to blow up buildings, to blow up armaments, to enable to give one army the edge over another army in the midst of the fray of battle as war was taking place. Thanks to him, the world was changing through the dynamite that he had invented. And then, in 1888, something quite remarkable happened. Nobel had a brother. His brother was not as famous as he was. His brother lived in the south of France. His brother took ill, and one day his brother died. And news spread to Paris. Nobel had died. And the editor of the main Parisian newspaper made a mistake. He thought that it was Alfred Nobel who had died and not his brother. So just imagine this. Alfred Nobel wakes up one morning. He opens the newspaper, and there he reads his own obituary. The story of his life as if he was dead. How many times can such a thing happen? An opportunity for a person to know what other people think of him after he's dead, while he's still alive. And the headline at the top of the page read, "The merchant of death is dead." And there was a description of how Alfred Nobel had devoted his life to cause loss of life, and how he had derived much pleasure from thousands of people dying through his inventions, and he hated what he read. And instantly, he realized that what he was doing in life simply wasn't the right thing. But how could he undo it? He couldn't bring those dead people back to life. He desperately wanted to have a good reputation. And he mulled over this, and he thought about it. And eventually, he came up with an idea. All the millions of dollars that he had raised, that he had earned, from the revenue from his inventions, which would comprise his estate after he would die, he would leave in his will all that money to the establishment of a peace prize. That's how the Nobel Prize started. He thought of this peace prize, an annual award for the person in the world who would contribute more than any other person to the furtherance of peace globally. And then from the idea of the Peace Prize there emerged other prizes in other endeavors of excellence. Nobel died in 1896. 5 years later, the first Nobel Prizes were given in 1901. And to this day, every year, Nobel Prizes are awarded. And by the way, you know that the largest group of people receiving awards is the Jewish people. Last year, there were 8 awards given in the Nobel Prizes. 5 out of the 8 recipients were Jews, many from Israel. And that's something we take a lot of pride in. And today, when we mention the Nobel Prizes, how many people are aware of the origin of it, of how it came about? Now, students, the reason why I'm telling you about this is that you're very fortunate. You're fortunate because you come from fine homes. You're fortunate because you are studying in one of the most outstanding schools within the Jewish world. In London, in the UK, I have heard so much about Mount Scopus, about your principal, Rabbi Kennard, about your staff, about your achievements, your incredible campus. We're very proud of you. And you're fortunate because your whole lives are lying open there ahead of you. And I would like you, please, to undertake a mission in life. Don't make the mistake that Nobel made. You do all kinds of wrong things, and then only to realize, when time is running out, that actually you'd wasted your life, or even worse, you've used your life for something which was not noble, something which was not proper. Instead, why don't you devote your lives towards doing some really amazing things? It's all within the palm of your hands. And in this regard, the best way to devote your lives is through being the antithesis of the way that Nobel was. Why don't you give of yourselves to society and to your environment? You know, in Europe, there was, in the last century, and before it, a very famous family, the Rothschild family. And the founder of the Rothschild family dynasty was a man who was so well known because in his lifetime, word had it that he was the wealthiest man in the world. His name was Anshel Rothschild. He was a very modest individual. He didn't boast. He didn't have a huge ego. He was a phenomenal philanthropist who gave a huge amount of money to charity. And one day, there was a visitor in the home of Rothschild, and he came into the study of the philanthropist, and with chutzpah, with cheek, he said to Rothschild, "Can you put a figure on what you owe? People say you have this amount of millions, this amount of millions. Do you know how much you've got? So that I can tell everybody what you've got." And Rothschild said, no problem. He went over to his desk, he opened the drawer, out of the drawer he took a ledger which had the word tzedakah, charity on it, and he started to top up some figures. And the visitor said, "I don't think you heard my question. I didn't ask you what you've given away. I asked you what you've got." And Rothschild said, "I heard your question and I understood it. You see," he said, "I won't be able to stay in this world forever. The time will come when God will take me. And the only thing that I'll be able to take with me to the next world will be the merit of what I've given away. All the material possessions that I've got, my home, my yacht, whatever it is that I have, my money, that won't go with me. The only thing that I'll be able to take with me will be the merit of what I've given away. Therefore, in truth, the only thing I've got is what I've given away. And that is what I'm worth." This man Rothschild lived a life which is the type of life I would love you to lead. A life in which you're here for the sake of others. And you know, giving to others, being there for the sake of others, is an integral part of what it means to be a religious Jew. Because Hashem in the Torah asks us to be loyal to Him and also to be decent human beings, to be what we call a mensch, a lovely person, to reach out to others with kindness and with warmth. Never to treat others in an abysmal or shabby way, never to bully others, rather to be there for other people in their time of need. That is a core and essential part of what it means to truly be Jewish, to be there for the sake of others. You're fortunate to be studying in this school, to be learning about Jewish values. Please now, when you think and dream ahead of what's going to happen in your lives ahead of you, think of a way through which to have a career, a profession, a way of life, an interest, a way through which you will volunteer so that you will be there for the sake of others. In essence, and with this I'll conclude before we have questions, I would love you to be a Rothschild, so that the essence of what you are will be what you give. And please don't make the mistake to be a Nobel. Thank you very much.
The Chief Rabbi is now very happy to take questions, either on what we just spoke about, or on anything relating to the Jewish world, to Israel, to anything. Who would like to answer a question? I can't see people. Well, let me start off. Oh, we have a question?
Thank you so much for asking that question. When I say give, do I mean just money or kindness? Definitely kindness. Some of the greatest gifts you can give are not financial. A gift of time, a gift of love. Do you know that just by smiling, that's a gift? The power of a smile. When you see people and they've got a gloomy, dark face, it's not nice. But when you see somebody who smiles, it can brighten up your day. And that's a gift that you can give to people, to give of your time, to invest your affection into the lives of others. In Jewish tradition, we talk about tzedakah, which is usually financial, and gemilut chasadim, which means loving kindness, which is all-inclusive. So when I'm talking about giving, I mean giving whatever you can, not necessarily money. Another question? Yes. Over here.
Hello?
Yeah.
So do you like really believe that Mr. Nobel had done nothing good in his life? Because the dynamite could have, it could have killed enemies as well, like really horrible people. So he might have done some good in his life. I just want to know what you think.
I think that's a really good question. And I don't think that he was totally terrible. The point I wanted to project to you is the fact that he himself was disappointed of how he was projected as being the merchant of death. You are right. Sometimes there are things that we can do which can be utilized in a positive or in a negative way, in a constructive or a destructive way. And yes, you're asking a heavy question here with regard to warfare. Sometimes it is important that we should be able to defend ourselves, because if we don't have good weapons, then the enemy could get the better of us, and as a nation we could be destroyed, God forbid. So there can be some advantage of that. What I criticize with regard to Nobel is his attitude. He delighted in the taking of life, not in the defending of innocence. And it's in that regard that he himself felt that he had taken the wrong path, and that's what he wanted to correct. Okay.
If Albert Einstein invented the nuclear bomb, then why wasn't he considered a bad person?
Why wasn't he considered a bad person? Okay. So, again, it's the same question. Thank you for asking it. What we produce can be used constructively or negatively. There's a very important message here. Let's take a computer. Is a computer bad or is it good? It all depends on what you use it for. A computer can be used for criminal purposes, for hate crimes, for messages which are terrible, for sending bullying messages through social media to other people and making their lives a misery, which is a terrible thing, and I hope none of you here do those kind of things. A computer can be used for dangerous images of one sort or other. On the other hand, a computer can be used to impart wisdom, to promote peace, to educate Torah. Do you know that in the sense of Jewish education, computers now are the most phenomenal tools that we have to increase knowledge and awareness and spirituality. So it all depends on what we do with it. And similarly, you can't castigate a person to say this person is absolutely this or absolutely that. Next question.
When Alfred Nobel actually did die, did people think different of him? Did he actually change his ways and make better things rather than take life?
Thank you very much for asking that, and I don't know the answer because I wasn't there at the time. And I think that your question, I think, comes to another point, and that is, what is the measure through which we know what kind of a person we are? Is it according to whether people like us for it, or is it according to whether we're doing the right thing? I think it's whether we're doing the right thing. So he wanted to be popular. It's nice to be popular, we should aim to be popular, but I think that sometimes it's more important to do what is right. Sometimes, some people might dislike us for our views, for our opinions, for our deeds. But as long as we know that what we're doing is the right thing, that is really what counts.
Since you said that computers can be used for good or bad, you said that they should be used to enforce wisdom. Do you believe in using them for video games?
So, I'm asked, do I believe computers should be used for video games? It's the same thing as what I was saying before. If your entire life becomes a series of video games, and you're hooked on the video games, and that's the only thing that you have a passion for, you'll agree with me, it's not good. But if now and then you need a break from whatever you're doing, from your serious study, from giving to charity, from all kinds of stuff, and you want to have some computer games, I think that's okay.
Okay, Chief Rabbi, I'd like to ask the next question. I'll take the third answer to the job of putting myself in a list of questions. And it's a question for me and my colleagues more perhaps than anybody else. What would the Chief Rabbi say are the crucial hallmarks of a Jewish education? Or to put another way, what should we be aiming for our students to leave Mount Scopus with in terms of their Jewish lives and learning?
Thank you for asking that. So, the aspirations we have through Jewish education. I would divide these into two areas. What depends on the brain and what comes from the heart. And both are important. In terms of the brain, we're speaking here about knowledge. We need to have Jewish tools to go out there in order to achieve much in this world, such as reading and writing, so that a Jewish person can be able to come into synagogue, follow the service, read the prayers, even lead the prayers. We need to be knowledgeable about the state of Israel, what has happened, particularly during the past century, the terrible Shoah, the Holocaust, the establishment of the state, and why it is so important for us to be passionate supporters of the state of Israel. We need to know history. We need to know Torah and Chumash and what happened in the past to our people, because that will provide us for the key for us to have a glorious future. So there's all that which we know. And then there's that which comes from the heart, what we feel in our emotion. And you know, we are very, very lucky people to be Jewish, because what it means is we can be happy. And this is a message I will never stop conveying. Judaism equals happiness. Torah equals joy. Sometimes people think, gosh, those mitzvahs given by God to Moses over 3,000 years ago, they're ancient. I want to tell you, they might have been given a long time ago, but they're really cool. To practice the mitzvot, Shabbat and Kashrut and Yom Tov and lighting candles and Lulav and Etrog and charity, they're all important mitzvot. They make us happy. They give us joy in life. When people are religious, it gives them a life of meaning. We have a privilege as Jewish people to embrace these things and to carry them out and to feel how wonderful it is to be Jewish. That's something which comes from our heart. So therefore, We need, through our educational system, to have that fusion, that combination of excellence of mind and brilliance of heart. And in that way, we will be able to know how wonderful it is to be Jewish and to feel how incredible it is to be Jewish. Next question.
We've heard a lot about anti-Semitism in the UK and England especially. Can you tell us about how the community's coping with it?
Thank you for asking that. There has been a recent increase in anti-Semitism. Our community is coping very well with it. The nature of the anti-Semitism has not been an increase of physical attacks against Jewish people in the UK. Nobody's life has been at risk, thank God. However, we have had a plethora of ongoing, relatively minor anti-Semitic attacks, but they are serious. The situation is not something to be taken lightly. At the same time, we're privileged in the UK to have full freedom as Jewish people to walk the streets with the kippah, to be accepted in society. We've got good friends in the highest of places, and while we are concerned, I don't think there is any reason for us to be alarmed. Wow, in my opinion, what's the best thing a person can do in their life? That's such a wonderful question, and I would suggest that that's a question you should all ask all the time. What's the best thing you can do in your life? And I think you'll probably come up with more than one answer, and that's good, because you don't have to have the very best thing. I think there should be like a list of the best things. And let me just, in this impromptu way, answer your question. Number one, be yourselves. Don't try to be the person that other people want you to be. Be the best person that you are. Because one day, when your life is finished, when you reach the glorious old age, the way that Hashem will judge you will not to be judging you by saying, why weren't you a Moses? Why weren't you a Sarah, a Rebecca, or a Leah? The question will be, why weren't you you? Because each one of you is created with your own personal potential, and therefore you need to express yourselves in the best way according to your ability. And my advice is, never set the bar low. Always be ambitious. Always aspire to great heights. Dream of doing phenomenal things. And please don't make the mistake to think that the best thing you can be is famous. That's a mistake. The best thing to be is a good person. And in fact, the best people that I've come across are people who are quiet behind the scenes. In their own homes, in their own communities, they do such incredible, what we call chesed, acts of loving kindness. Hardly anybody knows about it, but thanks to their goodness, the world is preserved. That's the type of thing I would love people to be the best possible people in their own way. And also, in terms of Torah and mitzvot, I can't stress enough the privilege we have as Jewish people, because God has given us this opportunity in the only life we've got to be as religious as we can. And if you are religious, it will make you happy. That's also something which I would hope many of you would be in your lives. But ultimately, the question is, to what degree am I impacting on my environment? To what extent is this world becoming a better place because I'm in the world? And the answer to that question will determine what the best things will be that you will do now, as you're growing up, and in your future lives.
What if our future is big cement walls around our Jewish religion, and you don't have the freedom to walk around as Jewish people in the world?
So you're asking, what if our future is big cement walls around our schools and we don't have the freedom to walk around? I hope that that's not going to happen over here. Even within certain community contexts where there is high security, people there will tell you it's absolutely fine living in that context. How many of you, by the way, have a South African connection? Wow, that's amazing. Incredible. Okay, hands down. Okay, so I was born and brought up in South Africa. And I went back. I've been back a few times. I was back in August, and I wanted to see the home in which I grew up. The people weren't at home, and you know I couldn't see the house because the walls surrounding the house were so high I couldn't even see the home in which I grew up. But what will South African Jews then tell you? Life is normal. Things are okay. We're used to it. The big walls around us, etc. So one can thrive, one can do well, and of course, the best place for Jewish people to live in is Israel. And in Israel, with all the security challenges, it's marvelous for us to have our own country. And the support that Jews in the world can give to Israel is of crucial importance to us.
Rabbi Mirvis, what are your aims as the Chief Rabbi?
What am I?
Your aims. Do you have any specific goals that you want to achieve during your time as Chief Rabbi?
Wow, okay. So my goals as Chief Rabbi, I've got quite a number. First of all, I want to teach the world about unity, about the importance of people existing in peace together, cooperating with other people. We need to respect differences. Even though other people might not be like me, I need to get on well with others. So we believe in unity and not uniformity. Uniformity is like when you're wearing a uniform. Everybody's the same. Uniformity is when you say the same thing, you believe the same thing, and you have the same opinions. That's not a Jewish ideal. A Jewish ideal is that we should respect differences and other points of view, and we should coexist peacefully with other people. Unity is very important for me. I would like to increase commitment to Jewish values, to raise levels of Jewish learning around the world. You're really lucky to be in a fantastic Jewish school. And I would love to see as many Jewish children around the school being students in outstanding Jewish schools. I would like to see synagogues not merely being places where people pray, but also powerhouses of communal excellence, so that people can enjoy doing all kinds of brilliant things in the shul, which can be a second home away from home for people. I believe strongly in something called tikkun olam. Please remember this term, tikkun olam. Tikkun olam means correcting the world. As Jewish people, we need to be devoted to all of civilization, to our entire environment. To be a good Jew means not only to be devoted to our own interests within our own community, we need to be good and outstanding human beings. And I would love more and more Jewish people to embrace this ideal in order to reach out to make this into a better world. I would like more Jewish people to support the State of Israel and to see the centrality of the State of Israel. And for me, a very important word is a mensch. To be a mensch means to be a decent human being. And that's why one of the first things I told you today was that an essential ingredient of being religious is being nice and being kind. If you're a horrible person, if you make the life of somebody else a misery, whether it's a member of your family or somebody in your school, in your social circle, that's the worst thing you can do as a Jewish person. We need to be really lovely and kind, and that's something that I would like to promote.
We have time for a couple more questions.
We've got one other thing for a very long time.
Go for it.
How long did, after Dr. Mirvis died, how long did that happening and he became a good person? How long did the reputation be good again?
Okay, so the obituary was in 1888. He died in 1896, 8 years later. And the first Nobel Prizes were given 5 years later, in 1901. So therefore there was an 8-year period after the obituary before he died.
Aaron?
Do you believe that Jews and Muslims will ever be able to coexist?
Do I believe that Jews and Muslims will ever be able to coexist? I pray for that day. I will try my best to achieve it, and I believe we all should. And ironically, Jews and Muslims, in a theological sense, have far more in common than Jews and Christians do. Because both Jews and Muslims believe in one invisible, true and absolute God, as opposed to the Trinity, which is something that Christians believe in. By the way, it's also important for Jews and Christians to get on really, really well, as is the case between ourselves and all other faiths. Fascinatingly, in my own engagement with Muslim faith leaders, we get on amazingly well because we have so much in common. The centrality of the family unit, the importance of the community, so many elements of our faith and our beliefs, even some of the terminology that we use with regard to charity and other activities. It is absolutely tragic that today there is a radical part of Islam, and as a result there is a huge amount of tension in Israel, in the Middle East, and in many places around the world. I'm an eternal optimist, and I sincerely hope that the answer to your question is yes. Please God, one day we will have full understanding, cooperation, and peace.
Okay, we'll do one more.
Why do you think the Jews have stayed faithful to Judaism through all the tough times?
Why do I think the Jews have remained faithful to Judaism
Through all the tough times.
through all the tough times? Wow, fantastic question. Do you know, if you want a proof of the existence of God, I will tell you the greatest proof of the existence of God. It's the fact that we are here today. The fact that I am here and you are here in a Jewish school in Australia in 2014, this is the greatest miracle that has ever taken place. And I don't say that lightly. How come? In every generation there are people who try to destroy the Jewish people. Just think of what has happened during the past century. Nazi Germany tried to destroy us physically. The Soviet Union tried to destroy us spiritually through forcing assimilation upon us. And that is what has happened over the ages. In the Torah, and we actually read it last Shabbat, God gives a promise. He says he will keep the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob going through all time. The Jewish people will live on, and God will remember the land of Israel. And here we are, against the odds. All other nations which have experienced our type of experience have long been forgotten. The fact that we exist as a nation, that we have maintained our faith, that we are loyal to God and to our Torah, is the fulfillment of what God told us would happen. And therefore the prophet Isaiah says, Atem Edai Le'um Hashem, you the Jewish people, you are the greatest proof of the existence of God. So if anybody wants to know, is there God? He is there, for certain, because he said that we the Jewish people will live on forever against the odds, in a miraculous way. And the fact that we're here as Jewish people talking about the Torah, discussing our faith, sharing our ideals in a Jewish school, that is the greatest proof that God exists, and our Torah is a true way of life.
On behalf of the Scopus, we'd like to really thank you for taking the time to get us this morning, the insightful wisdom, and I'm sure it will be something that will remain in our memories for a long time.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Rabbi Kennard, members of staff, pupils. It's a huge pleasure for me to be here today, to have an opportunity to visit your outstanding school, about which I have heard so much in the past. You should know that you're very fortunate to be studying at one of the great Jewish schools of the world, so ably led by Rabbi Kennard and a wonderful team of staff. And it's a real delight for me on my visit to Australia to have the opportunity to share some words with you, following which you will have the chance to pose some questions to me. So I'd like to start off by sharing with you some thoughts about the origin of the Nobel Prizes. Who was Nobel? Why are they called the Nobel Prizes? Now, actually, it all started in 1833, when Alfred Nobel was born in Stockholm in Sweden. He was a brilliant man, he was a chemist, and he invented no less than 250 inventions, which he patented. The one that he was most proud of was dynamite, and he really liked the fact that thanks to his invention, one army could get the better over another army, armaments could be blown up, buildings could be blown up, and he also made quite a neat fortune out of all the inventions that he sold. Something quite remarkable happened in 1888. Nobel had a brother who was living in the south of France. The brother took ill, and then the brother suddenly died. And the editor of the main newspaper in Paris heard that Nobel had died, and he thought that it was the chemist who had died. the famous Alfred Nobel. So just picture this. The possibility of this happening is just about impossible, but it did happen. One morning, Alfred Nobel wakes up. He takes the newspaper, he opens it to one of the pages, and there he reads his own obituary. When else can it happen that a person who's alive can read what the world thinks about him when he's dead? At the top of the page, the headline was, "The Merchant of Death is Dead." And the details of the obituary were all about the extent to which Nobel, through his inventions, had contributed to the loss of thousands of lives. And he thought to himself, gosh, is this how I am going to be remembered? And he felt terrible. And through this sheer coincidence, he felt, wow, God must be trying to tell me something. And so he thought about it, he mulled it over. And he came to the conclusion that he would need to make a U-turn in his ways. And so he recognized that he had made this fortune, millions, out of the sale of his products. And so he decided in his will to write that his estate would be given to the establishment of a peace prize. That was the original Nobel Prize, a peace prize, to be given to an outstanding world personality every year in recognition of that person's contribution towards world peace. And from the idea of the Peace Prize, there arose Nobel Prizes in other areas. Nobel himself died 8 years later in 1896, and 5 years later in 1901, the first Nobel Prizes were given. I think it's absolutely remarkable, because today when we hear about Nobel Prizes, many of which, by the way, are won by Jewish people around the world every year, but that's beside the point, we think in totally positive terms. Not many people know about the background to them. And I believe that there are a number of lessons we can learn. The first is the concept of tshuva. Because what Nobel did, actually, was something very positive and constructive. There are some people who waste their lives away, or who do that which is improper, and never correct their ways. He at least wanted to make that U-turn. The best way in which we can understand tshuva is through understanding a sculpture. Let's take a famous sculpture, Michelangelo's David. Now, there are two ways of explaining it. One way is to say that Michelangelo's greatness was that he created David out of nothing. The other way of explaining it is that in that huge slab of stone, David always existed. Michelangelo's genius was that he removed all the unnecessary parts to reveal David, who was always there. That is what tshuva is. Tshuva is a process through which we remove the unnecessary parts of our characters and personalities to reveal our real selves and to be the people that God intended us to be. And that's ultimately something which Nobel, to his credit, did. And then there is a second message. The second message is a message that I'd like to give you. Don't please become an Alfred Nobel. Don't engage throughout your life in doing something which later on you're going to regret. At least he had the chance to some degree to correct it. You're very fortunate. You're studying in an outstanding school. You have incredible facilities here. You have knowledge that is given to you, wonderful opportunities. You've got life in the palm of your hands. It's up to you to determine what careers, what professions, what endeavors you will engage in your future lives. Choose to do something which will benefit the world, so that you can be a blessing for your environment and for society. Don't find out at a later time, or lead a life through which you never find out that actually it's been a waste of time, or you've done something really terrible for civilization. And I believe, therefore, that we should engage in the very antithesis of what Nobel started out doing. And a great role model for this is a man whose name was Amschel Rothschild. He was the founder of the Rothschild banking dynasty, the original great Rothschilds. He lived in Frankfurt, in Germany. A few years ago, I visited his grave, and I saw that it was the smallest matzeva, the smallest gravestone in the entire cemetery. It just had his name and the date on which he died, and that was it. He was known as the wealthiest person in the world, but he was so modest that he didn't have a big ego, and he just wanted to be a good person towards others. You know, a number of years ago I applied for a grant from the Rothschild Federation of Europe towards an educational program that I was running. They provided the grant. And usually when you get a grant from various endowments or various organizations, trusts, they give you certain terms and conditions. And a condition usually is that whenever you advertise what you're doing in print, you have to say sponsored by the whatever foundation or whatever it is, because they want recognition. When I received this grant from the Rothschild Foundation of Europe, now close to 200 years after the original Rothschild lived, they said a condition of giving the money to us was we should never put in print the fact that they've given it. We're not allowed to advertise that in print. To talk about it like I am doing now is fine. Why? Because the original Rothschild gave matan beseter. He always gave gifts in private. He never announced it. He never had his name on a plaque anywhere. He did it secretly, because that is the highest level of charity. Isn't that incredible? And now, his descendants are giving away millions upon millions of pounds, and they always do it secretly, in the way that their ancestor used to do it. But I'm telling you about this because it is related of the visitor to the home of Rothschild, that he came into Rothschild's study, and he said to the very wealthy man, "But chutzpah, so what are you worth? Can you put a figure on your fortune? How many millions, how many billions have you got?" Rothschild said, "Okay, yeah, all right, I can give you the answer." He went over to his desk, he opened a drawer, he took out a letter. On the cover was written the word tzedakah, charity, and he started to tot up some numbers, and the visitor said, "You didn't hear my question. I didn't ask you what have you given away. I've asked you, what have you got?" And Rothschild said, "I did understand your question. You see," he said, "I'm not going to live forever. And when eventually I pass away, what will I be able to take with me into the world to come? Can't take money, can't take my houses, can't take a yacht, can't take any material possessions. The only thing I'll be able to take with me will be the merit of what I've given away. Therefore, in truth, ironically, he said, the only thing I've got is what I give away." So his life was the antithesis of the way Nobel's life started out, because he defined his value not according to what he was taking from the world, but rather what he was giving to the world. And that is the core of my message to you. Please give of yourselves to your environment, to be kind-hearted, to give tzedakah, to give time and talent and energy, and also love to people and to your surroundings. That is one of the core essential ingredients of a Jewish religious way of life, through which we need to be connected to God and also to our fellow human beings through acts of loving kindness. So before question time, and I welcome your questions and I'd love to hear from you, please don't forget my essential message to you today. Strive always to be like a Rothschild, because the only thing you'll really have is what you give to others. And please try never to be a Nobel. Thank you very much.
Okay, so I have the microphone here, and we have the opportunity to ask the Chief Rabbi some questions, either about what he's spoken about or anything at all. Who would like to begin? Or maybe a big loud voice. Thanks, Linda.
Considering the fact that the ultra-Orthodox community is the Haredi community, the fastest growing community in Judaism, and the modern Jewish world is assimilating at a faster rate than ever, what do you think is the future of Judaism?
So the future of Judaism, please God, will be bright and will be fantastic, because against the odds we've been able to survive over all the generations. And you are right to indicate that there is huge activity at the extreme. Sadly, there are some who are moving towards assimilation. Happily, there are those who are moving towards greater commitment. And the Jewish nation will continue to exist thanks to those who are committed to our values, to Torah, and to mitzvot. And therefore, these two stories are taking place at one at the same time, and I believe that as communities, we need to encourage members of Jewish communities to appreciate their roots. You know that a Torah true way of life is definitely more relevant today than it has ever been in the history of the world. in our fast-moving, materialistically driven, sophisticated society of 2014, a Jewish way of life is so relevant, it is so meaningful. Shabbat and kashrut and family way of life, giving to charity, which is a core tenet of Judaism, these are essential ingredients of what makes us happy. Happiness, joy, that's right at the center of what being religious is, and thanks to a commitment to Jewish religion, we do definitely have a brilliant future.
Next question. Richard?
Should homosexuals be extended all religious rights, including marriage?
So should homosexuals be extended all Jewish rights, including marriage? First of all, it is very important for us as a Jewish community to be inclusive, and every single person within our community should be welcome in our synagogues, and we shouldn't differentiate along any lines. We know what the Torah says in regard to homosexuality, and that is why while in certain countries, for example in the UK, now same-sex marriages have become the law of the land, according to halakha, it's not something that we carry out. But I would like to stress the fact that homophobia is definitely something which should be absolutely ruled out. We should have no tolerance for it whatsoever within our communities.
Anyone else? I'll extend the invitation to staff. Karen?
I would like to ask, how do you view the role of women, especially in the Orthodox community, and in leadership and the rabbinical position?
Okay, so how do I see the role of women? Women are more important in many respects than men when it comes to Jewish tradition and the preservation of commitment to Jewish life. And within our modern times, it is important for us as communities to be as inclusive as possible and to ensure that everybody who is part of the community is equally happy about their roles within the community, and therefore within Jewish law, within halakha, it's important for us to be as inclusive as possible. And we have seen within Orthodox communities around the world during the past generation or so some significant developments. For example, if you would ask your mothers and most definitely your grandmothers if they had a bat mitzvah, my guess is probably the answer is no, but bat mitzvah has become very much a central feature of our lives. And the opportunities for women to be included fully in Jewish education at the highest Kodesh levels, and taking on, you were asking about leadership positions. As chief rabbi, just a year ago, one of the first things I did when I was elevated to my high office was to ensure that the regulations, the laws of the United Synagogue, of British synagogues would be changed to allow women to occupy levels of leadership. And there are numerous other examples that we can give. The role of rabbi is preserved for men, but it is very important that we include women as being educational leaders and of taking on whatever responsibilities they can within our communities. And the overall result is the communities are blessed to have that input from the women within our communities.
Go ahead.
Do you think it's more important for the Jews to be united in Israel or to sort of disperse around the world of Jewish communities?
More important for the Jews to be united in Israel or to disperse around the world? Israel is central to our people. We pray to Israel wherever we are in that direction and through Israel to Hashem. It is very important, I believe, for us to show full solidarity with Israel, to support Israel, if at all possible to make aliyah, to go and live in Israel. And at the same time, wherever Jewish people are, we have to strengthen Jewish life. And therefore I think the answer to you is both. To have a strong, vital, vibrant, peaceful and secure Israel, and to have a thriving Jewish world working hand in hand.
Julia?
Hi, so my question is, do you think living like halakhic Jewish way of life only based on the Torah, only based on the Torah, is the only way to perpetuate Jewish continuity, or there are other ways?
Okay, that's a really searching question. And I think that where you have a cultural contribution to Jewish life, an educational contribution, a social contribution, even just eating a donut at Hanukkah time or matzah on Pesach, all of these things contribute and make us feel more Jewish. But if one is talking about the real guarantee for our future, by the way, there can be no absolute guarantee, but the closest thing that we can have towards a guarantee for our future, it is essentially a commitment to a religious way of life. Because ultimately, if all one is interested in is the cultural side of Judaism, the social side of Judaism, then after a generation or two or three, what we can see from statistics from the past, I'm not just presuming this or making it up, statistically we have proof of the fact that that contributes to a dilution of Jewish values and the disappearance of Jewish faith. So if we want to preserve faith, we need to be faithful. And we're lucky, because being faithful gives us meaning in life, it makes us happy. Something which I would really like to stress is the element of joy that Jewish tradition brings into our lives. Some people have the notion of the fact that, oh gosh, the mitzvot, they're thousands of years old, they're ancient, they're irrelevant. Actually, the opposite is the truth. Because we're finding, as I mentioned earlier today, that being religious is cool, it's with it, we earn the respect of people, and it enables us as individuals and as families and as communities to grow and to develop while being in touch with our surroundings, to be loyal to our traditions, and we really derive a lot of happiness out of it.
Ruby?
Hi. Why did you become a rabbi? Was it predetermined for you, or did you actively decide to become one?
Oh, deep question. Was it predetermined for me, or did I actively decide? And the answer is both. And I guess by your question, you really are asking a wider question. Why do we do things? Is it all predetermined, or do we have a say in it? Were you alluding to that as well? A bit. Okay. All right. So let's start off with the personal part. For whatever reason, I've always wanted to be a rabbi. Okay? Probably because my father's a rabbi, and I've had a lot of very strong rabbinic influences in my life, and I've seen that being a rabbi provides me with opportunities through which I can reach people and hopefully enhance their lives. To answer the broader question, everything is predetermined, because God, who knows all, doesn't only know what has happened in the past, he doesn't only see what is happening now, he knows what's going to happen in the future. And at the same time, we have free choice. It's that age-old philosophical debate of predetermination versus free choice. And the best way I can explain it to you, in a simplistic way, is as follows. A teenager comes to his or her parents and says, I don't know what to do, right? So-and-so is interested in me becoming a boyfriend or girlfriend. Is this the right person for me or not? Can you advise me? Parents discuss it, and eventually, after an hour-long discussion, the teenager goes out and says, okay, thanks for the conversation. I'm now going to make up my mind. And then the mother and the father turn to each other and they say, it's all off, right? He or she is going to decide, no way. After 2 days of contemplation, the child then speaks to the parents over the dinner table and says, you know what? I've decided I'm not going ahead. Now, the parents knew that already. They know their child. They could see the way things were moving. The fact that they knew what decision was going to be taken did not remove the free choice from that individual from taking that choice. When that child sat in his or her room and said, should I not, what should I do, etc., with all the pressures, etc., they had free will. Similarly too, the fact that God, who is all-powerful and all-knowledgeable, knows what's going to transpire, the fact that he knows that in 5 seconds' time I'm going to clap my hands, right? I decided to do that stupid thing, and it might have been 4.5 seconds, but God knew it all before. But that didn't remove my power to determine my future, and it's because I have that power to determine my future, I am accountable for my deeds. So you can't be standing up in a court of law, accused of whatever it is, and you say to the judge, God decided I was going to do it, therefore I'm innocent. No, we are accountable.
Go ahead, Mandy.
Do I ever see myself making Aliyah? The answer is, please God, yes. eventually. But absolutely, for me personally, Israel's very central to me. I studied in Israel for 10 years. I've got children and grandchildren living in Israel. Israel's very central to our people, and it's more along the lines of what we were saying before. We have a role in the diaspora to strengthen Jewish communities, and Israel is the home of the Jewish nation.
Josh.
Are you ever challenged by your beliefs? And if so, how do you overcome these challenges?
Am I ever challenged by my beliefs? The answer is yes. I don't believe that there's anybody on earth who's not challenged at some time or other. Because we are free-thinking people, because we encounter dilemmas and difficulties and sometimes tragedies. If anybody says to you, I've never been challenged, it's simply not true. Having said that, my beliefs always give me strength. And my beliefs enable me to weather numerous storms and give me a huge amount of what we call chizuk, which is encouragement. And I know that Hashem is with me, and He walks with me through thick and thin. And that is the centerpiece of my existence. And because I know for certain through my belief that God does exist, and He is there for our sakes, I am able, thankfully, thank God, to deal with many trying situations as an individual and together with my community and together with my nation. And from time to time, things happen and you kind of think it out and you need to work it out. And thankfully, once you've got that absolute belief, it certainly helps you a huge amount.
Cody?
As Chief Rabbi, obviously you hold a position of great influence. So what are your goals for the future?
Thank you for asking that. So what are my goals for the future? I have certain themes of my Chief Rabbinate. In my installation address 15 months ago, which was a historic occasion, I identified 3 areas on which I would concentrate. From the mission in Pirkei Avot, Torah, Avodah, and Gemilut Chasadim. Torah is education, the centrality of education, and having a school such as this, which is such a marvelous achievement of the Melbourne Jewish community, that for me is top priority, to have similar schools, similar provisions for education for Jewish people at all levels, formal and informal. Avodah relates to prayer and communities, to build up stronger Jewish communities, so that synagogues shouldn't just be houses of prayer. I'd like to transform all synagogues into powerhouses of Jewish religious, social, cultural, and educational excellence. And then Gemilut Chasadim relates to kindness. It's what I was talking to you about. Being a Rothschild and not being the way Nobel started out being. An important term that I always use is tikkun olam. Tikkun olam means making this into a better world. And as Jewish people, we need to be devoted not just in an insular fashion to ourselves, we need to be here for the sake of all nations. That's why God created us as His chosen people, to be a light unto the nations. And therefore we need to care about the presence of God, which is existing in every single person. And our charity and our loving kindness should be extending to one and all. Together with that, the centrality of the land of Israel, and to enable our communities to be strong, to be vital, to be vibrant, and for people to appreciate how lucky they are to be Jewish. You see, the reason why I think people should keep the mitzvot today is not out of fear. The message I give is not, you must keep Shabbos because if you don't, you'll be punished. Rather, the message I give is, you should keep Shabbos because if you don't, you're missing out big time. The mitzvot are so incredible. And I say that out of personal experience, as just a normal human being, knowing how the mitzvot enhance my life and give me so much joy and happiness. And that's a message I want to put over to people. Just to recommend a traditional, authentic, Torah true way of life, because you will be enriched and you will benefit out of it, and it's really something to try to do in the one and only life that you've got.
Anna?
It seems Nobel was only able to perform through God once he received revelation from God. How do you believe today that we can strip away ourselves and present just the best of us, perform as you are?
Right, thank you so much for asking that question, and especially as it appears there are no signals, there are no signs. Actually, Every day of our lives there are signals and there are signs. However, we choose not to hear them, not to see them, and mostly to ignore them. So if you read something in a book, or if something of coincidence happens, and it kind of prompts you to think, hey, is God trying to tell me something? Right? Then you can ignore it, or you can say, okay, if he is, I better act on it. Let me do something as a result. And realistically, I would say to you, these signs and these signals come all the time to us. If only we wouldn't be imprisoned by the world around us. You know, one of the criticisms that people give against Jewish religion is they say that by being religious, you're becoming enslaved to the Torah. It's removing your free choice from you. Actually, the very opposite is the case. If you're a secular Jew, you're imprisoned to your environment because you feel obliged to do what everybody else is doing, to conform, to appear, to look in a certain way, to do what everybody expects you to do, so that ultimately you're not being yourself. You're being the person that you would like other people to see you being. It's your persona that counts, not your true self. Whereas once you become religious, you realize that the true priority is what God wants of us. And knowing that we're serving the will of Hashem, that actually liberates us. It's exactly the opposite from how people see things to be. And therefore we need to open our eyes to see the opportunities that exist. And always, as we were saying before, to strip away that which is unnecessary, so that we should become the people that Hashem really wants us to be.
Lyndon?
Yeah. I understand you said that humans have free will, but if God is all powerful, why doesn't he intervene in times of suffering? Why did he allow the Holocaust?
Great question, a very troubling question. Thank you for asking that. It's something that I consider on an ongoing basis, having had members of my family who perished in the Shoah, and we all experience difficulties and tragic moments in our lives. Please God, you'll be spared from them in your lives, but you can't live a natural lifespan without going through an element of trauma or sadness at some time or other. And I'll tell you the answer to your question. You see, if God would intervene all the time, then we're not really in control of what is happening. In order that you can have a system of life which is based on reward and punishment, I need to have free will to achieve. And as a result, I will reap the harvest of the goodness of my deeds. And if I don't perform well, then I will suffer. God therefore gives us free will to do incredible things and also to do terrible things. You won't have the potential to do incredible things if you didn't have the will to do terrible things. So to be an amazing, giving, loving, contributing member of society means that at the other extreme, a person could become a Nazi, a Saddam Hussein, doing awful, inhuman, brutal acts towards others. The potential is there. The question with regard to the Shoah is not where was God during the Shoah, but where was mankind during the Shoah? How could people allow themselves to do these things? And how could the rest of society stand with their arms folded and allow them to do it? That is the key question. And we mustn't forget that when it comes to life, life is continuous. This is not the only world. The soul lives on into the world to come. If this was the only world, I'd be the first to say it's an unfair world. Look how many terrible people are prospering. Look how many amazing people are suffering. If life was restricted just to this world, the Torah doesn't make sense. It just wouldn't be right. But the reality is, the soul lives on. And it is in the world to come that God blesses us and gives us just reward for all our goodness in a way that will compensate us for the suffering we exist in this world. I strongly believe in the ongoing life of the soul and the fact that there is a world to come.
I think we have time for one more. Is that Natasha?
You said that there's always a world to come. What do you believe that is and why?
What do I believe?
Whatever comes next.
Sorry, I didn't hear.
You just referred to like a world to come, like after death. What do you believe that is and why do you believe that?
What do I believe that is and why?
Do you believe it?
And why do I believe that it will come? Okay. So having not been there, I can't tell you exactly. But in the context of our tradition, we have a neshama which elevates us above all forms of life. And it's through our neshama, our soul, that we're able to experience spirituality. It's not something physical, it's something spiritual. So when you feel very elevated, you're sitting around the Shabbat table and you're singing Zmirot, or you're singing together with a group of people some holy songs, you feel elevated. It's a soul experience. That's something beyond a body experience. So when our bodies die, God forbid, the soul continues to live on, because the soul is, in its very essence, the part of us which is created in the divine image. And therefore, in the world to come, souls live on and benefit from the radiance of God's spiritual presence. We strongly believe that in the world to come, family members are reunited. So where there is somebody who has passed away, we will meet up with them. There will be a reunion of souls in the world to come, which is a very meaningful thing, and it brings a lot of comfort to us to know that there will be that reunion of souls, and people will be at different levels of spiritual satisfaction based on how we run our lives in this world. And in this way as well, God does understand that some people have certain difficulties and challenges, and that's why we shouldn't judge other people. It's not for us to judge people, we should leave that up to God. Sometimes there might be somebody in your class or somebody or other, and you really dislike that person for what that person's doing. But what you might not know is the huge difficulties and challenges that that person has had at home, and how that person has built up himself or herself against the odds. And if only you knew what was going on in that person's life, you'd realize they are far more righteous, far better than you actually would ever be. So we shouldn't judge people. God knows everything, and it is in that world to come that our level of spiritual satisfaction will be graded. We talk about hell, but how can you suffer from fire or whatever it is when you don't have the physical essence? So that can't be what hell is, and in all probability, hell is just a very low level of satisfaction in the world to come. We know about the world to come from various references in the Torah, no direct reference. That is because our Torah is a realistic Torah. It's about this world, it's about the real world. And that's why it's a guide to life as it exists. But there are numerous clues and hints to the fact that Olam Haba exists. And for certain, there also have been studies about people who actually have had experiences through which they've been pronounced clinically dead, and then they come back to life, and they tell of experiences, spiritual experiences, through which they're going towards a very bright light, and a message comes, we're not yet ready for you, please go back, and then they come and they wake up in this world. There is a book which I recommend to you called Life After Life, written by Dr. Raymond Moody, an American author, which is an anthology of hundreds of those experiences which people have had. So there is ample proof of the fact that there is life after life, and God is fair, and as a result, let's make the best of this life while we're in it, to appreciate our Jewish background, and to be the best possible people we can.
On behalf of Mount Scopus, and especially everyone here, I would like to thank you for coming to speak to us. Your wise words have inspired us and influenced us in such a profound way.
Thank you very much.